here. Got some really fast nitro burners, piston burners, head gasket blowers. There's some cool stuff. I see some good names coming across here. Las Vegas, man. Hey, look, I want to tell you guys that these are going to be some engine ideas and some opinions of mine, okay? This is not some book you buy where it says, this is the rules of how this stuff works. I'm going to give you my opinion. And we've been lucky enough to do this for 61 weeks in a row. And hey, Mark, man, what nice paint Mr. Paint put on that Harley. I know you can do some good stuff, but I was really pleased with that. I would, one day when I get a little bit older, I'm gonna figure out how to get you to do one of those Mr. Paint jobs for me too. And I'm glad you came out okay, man, with your big wreck on that deal. There's a lot of scary stuff going on out there. You know what? We don't even have to scare ourselves on the racetrack. It's so scary in the world these days. Bruce, Derek, man, what a good time seeing you guys. Candy, hey Candy. Wow, look at that. There's girls and boys on here, and of course men and women. I don't know, boys, when they're grown up and they get to be like over 20 or 25, they hate for you to call them a boy. Like me, I'm just a country boy, okay? Yes, I'm old, I got a lot of miles on me. Girls, I think when girls get older, you can still call them girls. I don't know, maybe they don't even want to be, but I don't know. I understand, man. When I say boys and girls, I do not mean any disrespect by that. I'm telling you, man. Please don't. Boy, everybody, it seems like folks get their feelings hurt so easy. It's like we used to have some thick skin on our back, and it used to be kind of hard, but now it's like we have folks out there watching like the PC police. They're waiting to jump on you if you say something wrong or do something wrong. Happy birthday this week too, Jim Bob, Dave. So I wanted to tell you a couple things. I see folks every day, they send me questions. I welcome questions. Thank you for sending me questions. Thank you for thinking of me when you want my opinion, okay? Because I don't have the rules. I don't have the gospel on engines. I just have my opinion. So if you ever want my opinion, ask away. But today I'm going to talk about a couple things about people say, hey, well, these cams work in my stock heads. Okay, let me say this, and I have some notes here I wrote on the board, and I'll tell you about it. But one thing I want to tell you is the cams are not designed for stock heads or unstock heads or ported or modified heads. The spring is what matters on that, okay? So like this is a stock Milwaukee 8 valve spring, okay? When you got this installed in the engine and the retainers on it and the valves on the seat, and this is compressed down to installed height, let's say it has 80 or 100 PSI installed height. That's where it's installed in the head. Okay, when you put lift to this spring and you put your rocker arm on it and you squeeze this spring all the way till the valve is open, these coils stack up. They become solid. It looks like one solid piece. That is the bind height of the spring. So if you want it to last for a long time, you want it to back off from the bind height, like say you want like 50 thou clear or 60 thou clear or 70 thou clear between the coil so that it's not at full bind height. So this stock spring on a Milwaukee 8, 2017, 18, 19, 20, maybe 21, you can put 480, 485 thousandths lift in here without stacking the spring tight. It doesn't care whether the heads are ported or not. It only cares what the spring can handle. Now, this spring is made by PSI. It's a really nice spring. We use them in our Pro Stock Suzukis, Pro Stock Kawasaki, Pro Stock Harley, Pro Stock S&S engines, and now in our Milwaukee 8s, we use the PSI spring. One thing you can see right away when you look at them is this one has less coils and it's made out of a bigger wire. This one has a little wire and there's a lot of coils. So this spring here that I'm holding up, this spring will stack up tighter at only 480, 485 lift. So we make a camshaft called a 3030 cam that is the most cam that you can run with this spring, okay? Now, this spring is made for over 600 lifts. So we have our full race 615 camshaft that we use, and this spring will work because we can smash this all the way down till tight to bind height and still have 50 thou to bind clearance with 615 lifts. So I'm gonna say this spring here can handle 620, 625 lift if it's installed properly. If this spring is installed properly from Harley, from the motor company, we hope that a 485 will go in there. But if the head's bone stock with this spring in it, the biggest cam you can get in there is 485. If your head's bone stock with this spring in it, you can put 625 lift in the stock head. Now, that's enough of looking at me. And I see we got a lot of people watching. So if I change this camera angle over to the board, let's try it. And let's see how many folks I lose. Hey, Dory. Man, thanks for hopping on long enough to say hi. That was very nice. It ain't every day you get somebody named Dory comes on and says hi to you on Tech Talk Tuesday. That's pretty cool. Anyway, I wanted to talk to you about the stock heads on the Milwaukee 8 and the twin cam, and I want to talk about ported heads with stock valves, and I want to talk about ported heads with oversized valves and what we can do with them and how it works. So, this is not just Harleys, y'all. Think about this. Small block Chevys, Fords, Chryslers, Kawasaki, Suzuki's, all of that stuff is the same thing, all right? It's the same thing. Now, when I say same thing, I'm talking about it's the same deal, same rules apply. If the ports are really, really small and they got small valves, you can only put in the cam that will fit based on the lift available in the head. And the lift available, hey Harvey, sometimes the lift available is based on the spring, the capability of the spring. So I'm going to draw a little picture, a really elementary version. Here's a spring. You can see how elementary this is. If it was sitting here at free length, like this spring, this is free length. If we were to stack it up at full lift, the spring would look like this. That's the same spring smashed all the way to full lift. And it can't go, no more lift can go in this spring because it's smashed to bind height. I hope that makes sense to you. So if you have a spring that has the wire stood up more, at this angle, see how this wire is kind of stood up, whereas this wire is kind of flat. I'll draw an example. Stock spring, the wire is kind of at this angle. And the racing spring that can handle a lot of lift, the wire might be at this angle. Yeah, I exaggerated a bit, but you can see that this spring here has horizontal coils versus this one has higher jacked up coils so that you can get more lift in there. My buddy Joe Hornick, he calls that standing the spring up. Because if you stand up a piece of wire here and here, and you got a piece of wire that's bent in here like this, this is not very stood up. But if you have a piece of wire here, you would not believe how much pressure you can put on this wire when you push straight down on it. And if you have a piece of wire laid in here at this angle, it doesn't take much pressure to bend this down. So when the wires in the spring are laid down horizontally like this, there's not much pressure to bend this wire. When the spring is stood up like this, it has a lot more spring pressure. Like physically, I know I'm talking around in circles. Physically, this wire, this spring, is hard to compress because the wire is stood up. This spring has less pressure. I can mash it because the wire is already laid down. Now, back to the heads. A stock head, you can put any size cam you want in a stock head and it will run great until the engine runs out of air, but it's not the porting of the head that dictates how big a cam will fit. It's the spring that dictates how big a cam will fit. All right, I'm crossing that off the list. Ported heads, they flow more air, a little bit more, if it has stock valves. And I'm going to show you why in a minute. Ported heads are a little bit better with stock valves. But if you really want to increase the flow, you need ported heads with oversized valves to make more power. And when your engine is going fast on the intake stroke, it's pulling in as much air as it can. And you would think the port is the limit. You would think the port is the limitation of how much air gets into an engine. But it's not as much as the valve is. And I'm going to draw an elementary view. I'm going to try my best. A valve and then a port. Side view cutaway. All right. In this port, the air's coming in here, and here is the valve. Okay? I'm going to make this the valve. Here's the valve. It's open. Say 200 lift. Right here, say it's about 200 lift. And the air coming in here is totally unrestricted. There is no restriction. Get a pen so I can show you. There is no restriction in the port here. There's no restriction in the port here. None here, none here, none here, none here. There's a little bit of restriction here because there's this valve stem stuck in the port. But as soon as you get right here, this valve is in the way. So this is how it works, you guys. I'm going to go get a head. I want to show you for real. Hold on, I'm coming right back. Hang on, coming back. I had to go back to the head shop. Did I lose anybody? Whew, I got by the skin of my teeth. Thank y'all for waiting on me. All right, it's easy to hold a head in our hands without the valves in it and to think that that's how it runs. With the port, when the guy is porting your cylinder heads, CNC machine, by hand, or whatever, there are no valves. There are no valves. It is just an open hole, all right? It flows good when you look at it. If you were to take these valves out and stick a garden hose in here and spray water through here, it would spray out of here like crazy because there's no restriction. This port is unrestricted, okay? The only thing that's stopping this port from flowing 400 CFM is the stopper. Here is a stopper. These are stoppers. These right here stop the air from flowing. And if they didn't stop the air from flowing, we wouldn't be able to have compression. We wouldn't be able to have power stroke. All we would have is intake and exhaust. But you got to have the valves in here to make the engine run. So when we're talking about airflow here, if we're talking about airflow here, if this valve is gone and we've got just a pipe, it's pipe. All this is a piece of pipe. This thing flows 400 CFM. Just call a number, 300, 400, 500. It flows really great. But that's not how it runs. The port flows air around this valve. So if I said there is no restriction here, no restriction here, no restriction here, no restriction here, the only restriction is here. So if we were to break it down in percentages, let's just try and break it down into percentages. I hope y'all can see this okay. Does everybody follow so far? Step me up. Everybody? Okay. So the only, let's say there's 1% restriction here. Let's say around the valve guide, there's 4% and 1% there. When you get to the valve right here, 95% of the flow restriction is this valve. I'm just calling out numbers, okay? This is just to make it where you can understand what I'm trying to tell you. The port is not the restriction. So when your buddy's got his Dremel tool and he goes in here and shines this up and then he puts the stock valves back in it, it is still a stock head with stock valves. It doesn't flow more because, oh, I'm sorry, hit the camera. This stops the flow. 100% on purpose. All right, I understand this is elementary to you cylinder head porter guys, but I'm breaking it down to try and help us understand. this point right here. Ported head with stock valves will run a little bit better. It will flow a little more air because there are imperfections in the factory casting and the factory valve job. That means the port comes in and we have a valve job that we put in the head, and then the valve sits in the port and it matches to the valve job right here. That's what that's for. The air has to come in and go around here. It has to come in and go around here when the valve opens. And you want that to flow the most you can. So this is going to, no matter what cam you put in it, if it's a stock head with stock valves, you're going to run better only because of the cam's going to let more air in a little more lift because the valve is in the way, and if you add more lift, it's going to get the valve out of the way, so you're going to pick up power. If you port the head, it's going to smooth it up a little bit. Maybe you'll pick up 5 horsepower or maybe 6 horsepower by porting the head with the stock valves. So when somebody sells you a ported head with stock valves, it's still going to be restricted because the valve is the little part that's in the way. Ported head with oversized valves, now you're cooking. Now you are cooking, because a stock valve is 40 millimeters on an M8, and I think it's like, what are they, 1/900 or 1/8 something on a twin cam. And then here is an oversize that we sell. It's 2.5 millimeters over. So this makes the hole that's stopping the head from flowing out the way. That's why you need oversized valves. So ported head to match the oversized valves is what makes more power. So then we're going to go over here to the port again. And think about if we put a bigger valve here, now the port is too small. So now we can make the port bigger, and we can make the port bigger. And now we're going to get more flow through here, and we're going to get more flow through here because we put big valves in it. And they still shut, so you can make compression, intake stroke, compression stroke, and power stroke because you have the valve in the way. Now, I know I got some guys on here watching going, I'm saying blah, blah, blah. Okay, here's the way it works. The better the head flows, the less camshaft you need. The worse the head flows, the more camshaft you need. Now, I'm not talking about lift. Yeah, lift, yeah. But look, all Milwaukee 8 cams, let's just go here. Let's just say, what are they? 460 lift, and then you can buy some 600 lift. All right, that's 140 thou difference between the littlest cam you buy and the biggest cam you buy. 140. 1/8 of an inch is 125 thousandths. So the biggest, let's do it again. 450 lift and 600 lift. Let's do that. That's 150. 150. 1/8 of an inch is 0.125. So if you put a 450 cam in it that you can buy, everybody sells a 450 lift cam or something close, and then you put a 125 cam on top of it, more lift, now you're talking about a 575 cam. So the most between the littlest cam on the market for sale and the biggest cam on the market is really only 150 thou. That's little. 150 thou is really little. Our cams, just for GP, just for general purpose, is for the stock heads. When I say stock heads, I'm talking about a stock spring. Without taking the heads apart and putting springs in it, you can get our 485, which is the 30-30. I know this sounds like a commercial. And then we also have our 3/4 cam, which is one of my favorites. It is for some good springs, and it is a 585. And then these springs that we use for the 3/4 cam and the 615 cam, this is our full race cam. All right, that's our 3 Milwaukee 8 cams we sell. And these came from lots and lots of experimentation. All right, I'm going to run out of time if I don't move on. So, no, I'm going to run out of time if I move on. So I'm going to move on. let's talk about something else that is very interesting that I wanted to share with you guys. Right down here, I drew primary gears like a Suzuki. Got a crank gear and a clutch gear. On a Harley, we have a motor pulley and a clutch pulley. So this has a chain, and this has the gears. Now our S&S 160 Pro Stock engine that S&S sold us to run NHRA had gears. We ran a Suzuki gear here, Suzuki 1150 gear, and we ran a billet gear. Liberty makes them now, and it's geared to make a 1.36 ratio. That means 1.36 difference in speed from the crank gear to the clutch gear. Crank gear goes 10,000, this gear goes 1.36 less speed than this gear because they're meshed together. On your Harley, your M8, your twin cam, they have a pulley on the engine, they have a pulley on the clutch, and they have a chain that goes around it. Interesting, the factory ratio for this with a stock crank pulley, or they call it motor sprocket, and the clutch basket gear is 1.56. You see that? A Suzuki Pro Stocker, like say Jerry Savoy and the Vance and Hines guys with the Suzuki Pro Stockers, they run a 2.14 ratio. And let's see what else. The S&S is 136. The Twin Cam's 156. Oh, here's one, 177. This is a Suzuki Pro Mod, 177 ratio. So whenever you watch PDRA or whatever's the coolest thing going, where they got the 3-second Suzuki's running with turbos and nitrous and all that stuff, most of those guys have a 177 primary ratio. That means that the crankshaft, the clutch basket's going 1.77 times slower than the crankshaft. On the twin cam, the clutch basket's going 1.56 times slower than the crankshaft, 1.36 times slower than the crankshaft. So let's move over here and show you what that means to all of us. On the Suzuki Pro Stock that you see on NHRA, they're turning the engines between 13,500 and 14,000. That makes the clutch basket go 6,300 RPM at 13.5. So a 2.14 primary reduction ratio at 13,500 means this clutch basket is going 6,300 RPM. On the Pro Mod bikes, where they're shifting those bikes about 10.5, some of them turn more, some turn less, because they really work on low speed, is what we do is if you have a Pro Mod Suzuki or any guy that has the GS 1150 stock ratios and you turn the engine 10,500, the clutch basket's going 5,900 RPM. Now, if you have, let's jump over here, is because the Pro Stock, let me change this back one more time. The Pro Stock Suzuki, the Pro Mod, and the S&S Pro Stock bike all have the same clutch. Clutch plates, clutch basket. They all run the same part number clutch plates. Very interesting because look at the speeds. Now, the S&S Pro Stock engine that Matt Smith and the Aranas and maybe the Harleys, I don't know what they run. Nobody does, but that's okay. They run a 136 ratio, and at 9,500 RPM, and those engines go over 10,000 now, that clutch basket's turning 7,000 RPM. Now, what's unique or interesting about this to me is people say that the clutch basket in the Suzuki is turning faster than these guys, but they're wrong. Pro Mods only turn 5,900. The Pro Stock Suzuki's only turn 6,300, whereas Matt Smith and those guys are turning over 7,000 RPM with the clutch basket. Why is that important? Well, it changes the load. It will take less spring pressure to hold this one in place. It takes more spring pressure to hold this one in place. And then when you go and get your stock twin cam, or your stock Milwaukee 8 with a 34-tooth motor sprocket on it, gives you a 1.56 ratio. That's what stock is. And if you turn that engine 6,000 RPM on your twin cam and your Milwaukee 8, your clutch is only going 3,800 RPM. So it doesn't take much spring pressure. That's why the lever is nice and easy. And then there's people out there that think that if they put a different motor sprocket on their Suzuki, their Harley, like go from a 34 to a 30, they say that it accelerates faster and it does this and it does that. It doesn't change. You can change the rear gear and keep the clutch safe. But when you go from this 156 on your Harley, by changing the motor sprocket to a smaller motor sprocket, you go from 156 to 138 primary ratio, and that jacks the clutch speed up from 3,800 to 4,300. And if this was slipping a little bit on the racetrack or the dyno or on the street, and you change the motor sprocket, you will not be able to control your clutch. So here's what happens next. If you put a 30-tooth motor sprocket on front, put a smaller motor tooth sprocket. If you put a smaller one on here, you speed the clutch up, and now it slips so bad you got to put a lockup on it. Then when you put a lockup on it, then it puts more stress on the primary, the chain, puts more stress on the crankshaft, puts more stress on the transmission, it puts more stress on the rear chain or the belt, and you break a lot of parts because it's hard to control a clutch going this fast. When you watch the NHRA guys on TV and you watch the Pro Stock Suzuki's run, remember their clutch basket is turning slower than the V-twin guys. And these guys right here have to have more clutch lever, more clutch pressure. And a lot of folks think it's because this engine has more torque than this engine. But when they both go 105 60 foot with the same tire at the same racetrack, they both have very similar torque based on RPM and the gearing advantages. And I'm just about done again. I want to tell you about, yeah, that's good. You pointed out that the weights become more reactive. You have a lot more adjustability at 7,000 RPM than you do at 3,800 RPM. Think about that, man. 10 grams on 3,800 will make a difference. 10 grams at 7,000 won't make a difference. I'm going to change the camera back over and talk to you guys for a minute. All right. Whew, that's good for my adrenaline. I get worked up talking about that stuff. We got a couple minutes left. If anybody, let's do question. Who has the question? Somebody's waiting for George to say, let's do a question and answer. Bring me one. Let's watch. I'm waiting. Come on. Give me the question. I'm waiting. 20 seconds. And we are holding for the question of the day. Phone is ringing. Hello? Nobody's there. All right. I didn't get my question. What does that mean? I'm behind? You're behind? Here we go. When can we get into the showroom and shop again? Great question. How about next Tuesday? Will you ride a Nitro Harley? Do you still have a good clutch hand? I have a good clutch hand. Yes, Julian, thank you. How many horses am I going to gain tomorrow? Whew. How big is your stable? All right. Best valve throat diameter. Biggest one you can get. So if my clutch spins faster, how? Asgard. Bruce. All right, how was my day? My day was great. My time was up. Thank y'all. Woo-wee, it was great. Wonderful show, wonderful time. Thank y'all for watching, man. God bless y'all. Check in again. Send me questions. Appreciate y'all. May God bless.